about this yesterday. John Walker's role, it might not necessarily lend itself to counting stats, but when you look at the tape, how do you evaluate how he's performing and his return from injury and what kind of value he brings to your scheme?
Yeah, I think, interior defensive linemen can have a huge impact, and I think to your point, not always on the stat sheet. It's they don't get the tackle, but they actually make the play because of the things that they do. And I think there's certainly some examples of that with our interior guys. I think that also the messaging for the entirety of the defensive front, we got to find ways to make more negative plays. And some of that's calls, so it's not just them, it's coaches and everything else. How can we find a way to get offenses behind the sticks? No, I've been pleased with John, and I think it's like to your point, 6 games in and you're playing 40 snaps a game and stuff like that. I just think it'll continue to build that way, the cumulative impact of Saturdays, and every week's a different challenge and different offenses. But now you've been in it more, and recognizing too that whether it's pass numbers or run numbers in terms of what you're seeing from your particular offense. Some days the stat count is just literally predicated because they didn't throw the ball very much, or they ran it outside, and some of those things. So those are things you can't control, but works hard on a day in and day out basis, and I think there's more production out there for him, and I think it'll come.
Coach, what have you seen from the game tape going up against West Virginia this weekend, going up against a Rich Rodriguez-led offense?
Yeah, it's just very multiple. The ability to create an explosive. You see the impact of the defenses that have been able to prevent them, and it probably like a lot of offenses, but some more than others. Where if you can control the explosive, makes it very difficult to sustain drives and everything else. And so, but there's a healthy respect on our end as we watch the tape, how quickly it may be short gain, small gain, and then the home run. And so and they do it by a number of different ways. Most specifically, when you're talking about the motions and jet series that he's been so good at over the years, and misdirection, and then it's off of that, and then there's a pass off of that. And so, eye control is critical, discipline is critical. We talked about communication on the back end and stuff. So, it's one of those type of offenses. One word probably isn't enough communication, because now you gotta be, okay, well, but when this happens, we gotta say this, and some of those things. So, really test you defensively that way.
They're coming off a bye week. Do you always kind of expect big changes, especially that's a team in a similar situation? UCF, a rebuilding year, they're trying to get some momentum in Big 12 play. You kind of expect the unexpected, especially when the team has much more time to prepare for you.
You do. I mean, it's kind of like what hole do you drill down? How far do you drill? What does that mean? How do they use that time? Obviously from a personnel standpoint, played several quarterbacks. Okay, does that sort itself out by the time we see him, or are we going to see a combination of several guys in that? And so you do have an expectation that there's a good chance what we see, especially early in the game, probably won't be exactly what we've watched on tape. And so from that standpoint, it goes back to you got to trust your rules, you got to trust your communication, and it's kind of the not so fun pieces as you go through it, the monotony of communicating and trusting your eyes and everything else. And then in the end, being knocked down pieces on the back end, and you don't say survive the down, but if it gets real fancy, we got to survive the down, move on. It's not a game of first downs; it's a game of touchdowns, and so that can't be overly emotional. If it's a 10-yard gain early in the game.
Yesterday, Nigel Leak said that if the offense scores 10, we've got to hold them to 9. That seems like a lot of pressure and a lot of margin for error. Is there a cumulative effect on the defense, knowing that they don't have many mistakes that they can even make?
Well, I'm number one. I'm glad he said it. I'm glad that those are his words, not mine. Although I would echo that. That's sport. There's times when you joke about baseball here. I know that it's 1-0. Well, guess what? That's a requirement of the pitcher on that particular. It's the same thing in basketball. They're hitting threes. Well, we got to respond to a certain point. So maybe sometimes they're fall away threes, but we got to somehow equal that, and then vice versa. And so our number one goal, goal on a week-in-week basis is to hold the opponent to one less point than we score. That's it. That's sport. Now everything else is talking about the standards and stats, and they all matter, but there's one in particular that hits you over the face when you don't get it, and that's the win-loss component. So I think you got an experienced guy that kind of gets that. I think my hope would be that is the voice of the football team, and most specifically in this case, the voice of the defense that truly means that, and it fires me up because that's something that you kind of preach, but in the same token, like you say, you don't put what's the number is going to be on a particular weekend. Well, some weeks it's going to be that, and there's other weekends that we know that we're winning those guys on their side to save our team. So that's part of it, and it's as much as we're siloed out in football and of all the sports we talk about, we kind of pretend like we're not on the same team. Sometimes it's like a unit, and a unit is not offense and defense. I mean, a complete football team. What's required is to do our part, and every game's different that way. So we got to find a way to get stops, and there's a version of us that can get that done. I guess that would be my final kind of addition to Nigel League's quote is, well, that's really, really hard. Okay, we can do hard things. Like that's there's a version of us, and we got to get that version out.
You 3 weeks in a row in Big 12 play, you played experienced quarterbacks that have been in the system with the school for multiple years. This week, in playing in West Virginia, what goes into the thought process and kind of the planning or game plan for somebody who doesn't have that level of experience, is a kind of new player in a new program and doesn't have the same level of tape as the other guys you've seen?
Yeah, and I think to your point in terms of the experience, I mean, that'd be a tremendous study across college football. I know from a defensive standpoint, it's something that we recognize. When you're seeing experience, not just time in college, but most specifically in a scheme, at a place, there's just, those are things we used to talk about how important were. Now we kind of ignore it because it's not really available everywhere because people change. Well, there's a reason that was always a big deal all the time, right? The best part of a freshman was the famous quote, the best thing about a freshman is they turn into sophomores type of thing. Well, that's still the case. The best thing that happens to you is the cumulative impact over the course of time, guys being with you, the development piece and all that stuff. And we don't talk about it enough because it's not always available to you, but I'd be fascinated across, I would just worry about the guys we play, but that was very real the last 3 weeks. And so when you have some guys that are inexperienced, you just recognize, the fact that we don't know what we don't know, just maybe as much as they don't know what they don't know at this particular moment. And then sometimes that includes a willingness to drive the ball downfield into coverage when you got to take advantage of when that happens, or you put them in a situation where they make a mistake, but you don't make them pay for it, and they can get real confident real quick. And in some cases, with young guys, I would say that would be the thing is maybe fears you or strikes fear most defensively is for a young guy. Sometimes it doesn't take much for them to get that confidence. They break a run, and all of a sudden it's they're starting to feel a certain way because they don't have as much experience that way. Maybe the first explosive play they've had. So
does it tempt you as a play caller to be more aggressive in those moments, or to kind of like maybe let them make a mistake in what you're
yeah.
showing?
I think in theory, absolutely, and then I think that sometimes ties into, if you're not careful, then you have a lack of respect for the scheme and the 10 guys that are around them, and say, okay, well let's attack this individual, the run game, the motion, the 53 in the third that they make you to defend, and you're talking about an experienced play caller, Coach Rodriguez. I mean, he understands the level of experience in the quarterbacks too, and so he's as best he can is trying to put them in the best situation possible to be successful, and certainly at times over the course of your has. And so there's that mix. I mean, it'd probably be a long answer, but taking your shots that way, but also have a respect for the other 10 and the deception piece of all that goes on to it.